I want to show you something. This is a barn in Canterbury, New Hampshire, built in 1793. The interior walls have never been repainted, not once in 230 years. The color is still there, not faded to nothing, not peeling at the edges, not chalking off onto your hand when you run a finger across it. The surface is hard, harder than most walls built last decade, and it is painted the same deep red it was painted the day the Shakers first moved in. I pressed my fingernail into that wall. It did not give. The paint costs less than $1 per gallon to make. The ingredients are in your kitchen right now. And the reason you have never heard of it is the same reason I replaced the fence 4 times in 25 years before I knew better. My name is James Merritt, and what I am about to show you is the oldest, most durable paint formula in American history, buried not because it stopped working, but because it could not be put in a can with a logo on it and sold back to you every 3 years. The problem with modern paint. Let me tell you what latex paint actually is. It is a suspension of plastic particles, acrylic or vinyl polymers in water. When you brush it onto a wall, the water evaporates and those plastic particles fuse together into a thin, flexible film sitting on top of the surface. That film is the entire product. Everything you paid for is that thin layer of plastic sitting on the surface of your wall. And that is also its fundamental weakness. Plastic film does not breathe. It sits on top of the surface rather than bonding with it. Over time, moisture from inside the wall, and there is always moisture moving through any wall in any climate, gets trapped beneath that film. It has nowhere to go. It builds pressure, and eventually it pushes the film off from the inside. That is what peeling paint is. It is not age. It is not weather. It is trapped moisture finding the path of least resistance.
And that path is always straight through the weakest point of the plastic film sitting on your wall. The average exterior latex paint lasts 5 to 7 years before it requires repainting. Interior latex, 7 to 10 years on a good surface. That timeline exists not because the chemistry has run out, but because the film has separated, cracked, or allowed moisture beneath it. And once moisture is under a latex film, the failure accelerates rapidly. I repainted the back bedroom of my house 3 times in 20 years. Same wall, same prep, different brands each time. The contractor I used on the last job, a man I trusted, told me that 5 to 7 years was simply the lifespan of exterior paint in this climate. Pennsylvania winters, he said, high humidity, nothing you can do. I accepted that. For 30 years I accepted that. Then I found the Shaker records. Who the Shakers were and what they knew. The United Society of Believers in Christ's Second Appearing, called the Shakers by everyone outside their communities, were a religious sect that established settlements across New England and the Mid-Atlantic states, beginning in the late 1700s. They are remembered today mostly for the furniture, clean lines, no ornamentation, made to last generations. What is less known, what the furniture world has almost entirely absorbed without attribution, is that the Shakers were systematic chemists. Not in the modern laboratory sense, in the practical, documented, iterative sense of people who needed things to work, who could not afford to replace them, and who kept meticulous records of what worked and what did not. The Shaker communities at Canterbury, New Hampshire, Mount Lebanon, New York, Pleasant Hill, Kentucky, all of them maintained detailed records of their building practices, material inventories, application methods, results observed over decades. These records exist. They have been digitized. They are sitting in archives at Hancock Shaker Village, at Western Reserve Historical Society, at the Library of Congress. And in those records, beginning in the early 1800s and continuing without interruption for more than a century, is a paint formula so simple, so cheap, and so durable, that modern material science has spent 50 years trying to replicate what it does and has not fully succeeded. The formula is milk paint. Not the powdered milk paint you can buy in boutique paint stores today at $30 a bag. Not the reconstituted version with stabilizers and polymer additives. The original formula. 3 ingredients: milk, lime, pigment. And before I explain why it works, I need to explain why it works better than anything made since. The chemistry no paint company wants to discuss. Milk contains casein. Casein is a phosphoprotein, a large complex molecule that makes up about 80% of the protein content in cow's milk. When you add an alkali to fresh milk, lime for instance, which is calcium hydroxide, the casein precipitates out of solution and begins to undergo a transformation that material scientists now call cross-linking. The casein protein chains bond with the calcium ions in the lime. They bond with each other. They bond with the mineral surface they are applied to: wood, plaster, stone, brick. The result is not a film sitting on top of the surface. It is a mineral matrix that has chemically fused with the substrate at the molecular level. This is not a metaphor. This is measurable chemistry. A 1998 study published in the Journal of Coatings Technology by researchers at the University of Delaware found that casein-based coatings exhibit adhesion values 2 to 3 times higher than conventional latex primers on porous substrates. The mechanism they identified was direct covalent bonding between the casein protein chains and the calcium silicate structures present in plaster and masonry. Covalent bonding, not mechanical adhesion where a paint film grips the texture of a surface the way Velcro grips fabric. Actual chemical bonding at the molecular level. The paint does not sit on the wall. The paint becomes part of the wall. This is why you cannot peel milk paint off a properly prepared surface. There is nothing to peel. The surface layer and the paint layer are now the same material. And because there is no film, no separate plastic layer, there is nothing for moisture to get under. Water vapor moves through milk paint the same way it moves through the wall itself. Freely, without pressure building, without the mechanical failure that ends the life of every latex paint job you have ever paid for. Pliny the Elder documented casein-based adhesives and coatings in natural history in 77 AD. He described Roman craftsmen mixing curd with lime to create a material of exceptional hardness for interior surfaces. The same chemistry, documented 2000 years ago, being used by people who needed surfaces that lasted because they had no contractor to call when something failed. The Shakers refined it. They added iron oxide for the deep barn reds. They added ochre and amber for the interior yellows and browns that still cover the walls at Hancock Shaker Village today. They documented the ratios with the same precision they applied to everything else, and the surfaces they painted in 1820 and 1830 and 1840 are still intact, still hard, still colored. Not because they were lucky, because the chemistry is correct. What happened to it? Milk paint did not disappear because latex was better. It disappeared because latex was manufacturable at scale, could be standardized, could be put in a sealed can with a 2-year shelf life, could be distributed nationally through hardware chains, and most importantly, could be patented in its specific formulations. You cannot patent casein. You cannot patent lime. You cannot patent ochre. These materials predate the patent system by centuries. There is no proprietary molecule to protect, no licensing revenue to generate, no reason for any paint manufacturer to promote a formula that costs 40 cents per gallon to make when they can sell you a gallon of latex for $50 and have you back in 5 years for the next one. The shift happened between 1945 and 1960. Before the war, milk paint and lime-based coatings were still in common use in rural America, particularly in New England and among Anabaptist communities, Mennonites, Amish, and yes, the Shakers, who were still active at their larger communities into the 1950s. The knowledge was still alive. People still knew how to make it. Then the post-war petrochemical expansion flooded the market with synthetic products. Latex paint was marketed as modern, clean, easy, color-consistent, and long-lasting. It was easier to apply, dried faster, and cleaned up with water. For a population that had just spent 4 years doing without everything, convenience was not a small thing. The contractors adopted latex because it was faster. Faster meant more jobs per day. More jobs meant more income. The learning curve for milk paint, understanding the chemistry, getting the ratios right, knowing how to prepare the surface, became a competitive disadvantage in a market racing toward convenience. Within 1 generation, the knowledge stopped being passed down in any formal way. By 1975, you would have had difficulty finding a professional painter in most of the United States who had ever mixed a batch of casein paint. By 1990, it existed mainly in the restoration community.
Preservationists working on historic structures who had gone back to the original records because the modern alternatives were failing on surfaces that the original paint had held for 150 years. I am not telling you to resent the paint industry. I am telling you to understand the mechanism by which useful knowledge disappears.
It does not disappear because something better replaced it. It disappears because something more profitable replaced it.
And the difference between those two things is exactly the cost of every paint job you will do in your lifetime. The formula. The base formula is this: 1 quart of fresh skim milk, 2 to 3 tablespoons of hydrated lime calcium hydroxide, available at any masonry supply store for about $8 for a 50-pound bag. Pigment of your choice: raw iron oxide for red or brown, yellow ochre for warm yellows, lamp black for dark colors, titanium dioxide for white. That is it. Start with the milk at room temperature. Pour it into a clean bucket, glass or stainless, not plastic, because lime reacts with certain plastics. Add the lime 1 tablespoon at a time, stirring continuously. Within 30 seconds of adding the lime, you will see the milk begin to change. The casein proteins begin to precipitate. The mixture thickens slightly and takes on a slightly opaque quality. Add your pigment last, after the lime is fully incorporated. Stir thoroughly. The consistency you are looking for is slightly thinner than latex paint, closer to heavy cream than to the thick paint you brush out of a can. This is intentional. Milk paint penetrates the surface on the first coat rather than sitting on top of it, and the thinner consistency is what allows that penetration to happen. Apply with a natural bristle brush. Work in sections of about 4 square feet, applying with firm strokes and then back brushing lightly to even the surface. The paint will look thin and slightly uneven when wet. Do not try to correct this by applying more paint. Let it dry completely. This is the step where most people who try milk paint for the first time make a mistake. Milk paint looks wrong when it is wet. It looks pale, streaky, almost like a wash rather than a coat of paint. After 2 to 4 hours of drying, and it dries faster than latex, the color deepens, the surface hardens, and what was pale and uneven becomes rich and uniform. Apply a second coat the same way. Allow it to dry fully. On a properly prepared porous surface, bare wood, fresh plaster, raw masonry. 2 coats of milk paint will produce a surface that is harder than any latex paint you have applied to the same material. Run your fingernail across dried milk paint. It does not give. It does not mark. It does not flex the way a latex film flexes. It has become part of the surface. For exterior applications or for surfaces that will see direct moisture, there is a single additional step, documented in both the Shaker records and in the Pennsylvania Mennonite maintenance logs I found in Lancaster County. After the final coat of milk paint has cured for 48 hours, apply a single thin coat of boiled linseed oil, cut 50-50 with real turpentine. The linseed oil penetrates the casein matrix and adds water repellency without sealing the surface against vapor transmission. The paint remains breathable. The linseed oil simply closes the outermost pores against liquid water while allowing vapor to pass freely. This is the combination that produces the 200-year surfaces. Not the milk paint alone. The milk paint plus the linseed oil finish coat, applied in sequence, each allowed to cure fully before the next is added. Total material cost for 1 gallon of mixed milk paint, approximately 30 to 50 cents, depending on pigment. For the linseed oil finish coat over a standard room's worth of surface area, under $2. The contractor estimate I received for repainting the back bedroom of my house, latex, 2 coat, standard prep, was $840. I did it myself with milk paint for $6 and a Saturday afternoon. That room has not been repainted in 9 years. The surface shows no sign that it will need to be. What this means for your house right now. If you have bare wood surfaces, unfinished furniture, raw framing, new construction woodwork, milk paint is the single best thing you can put on them. It bonds at the molecular level.
It will not peel. It will not chip. It will not fail in the way that every film-based coating eventually fails. If you have plaster walls, old plaster, not drywall, milk paint is the historically correct and technically superior coating for those surfaces. Plaster is a calcium-based material. Casein paint bonds directly with the calcium silicate structure of plaster in a way that latex never does and never can. If you have a barn, a shed, a fence, any exterior raw wood surface, the combination of milk paint followed by a linseed oil finish coat will outlast any exterior latex product you can buy at any price point. The one surface type where milk paint requires caution is over existing latex paint. Because latex creates a non-porous film, the casein has nothing to bond with chemically. On a latex-painted surface, you need to either remove the latex fully or apply a bonding primer specifically designed for casein adhesion before milk paint will perform correctly. On bare surfaces, there is nothing to qualify. The chemistry is correct. It has been correct for 2000 years. And it costs 40 cents a gallon to make in your kitchen this weekend. The Shaker community at Canterbury painted their buildings beginning in 1793. They used milk paint on the interior walls, lime wash on the stone exteriors, and linseed oil as a protective finish coat on all exposed woodwork. Those buildings are standing. The paint on those walls is intact. The surfaces are hard. The colors are present. Not because the Shakers were exceptional craftsmen, though they were. Not because New Hampshire has a gentle climate, because it does not. But because the chemistry they used bonds with the surface at the molecular level and does not age the way a plastic film ages. I spent 30 years accepting that repainting every 5 to 7 years was simply the cost of owning a house. It is not the cost of owning a house. It is the cost of using a product that was designed to be replaced. The formula that does not need replacing cannot be sold to you, so it was never advertised. And the silence was enough. Find the oldest painted surface in your home, a wall, a door, a piece of furniture, and leave me the year it was last painted in the comments below. I want to know how many cycles you have been through, and if you know someone looking at a paint estimate right now, send them this video before they sign anything.